Soul for a Soul by John Hope. Narrated by John Moe. Chapter 5. An Unorthodox Avenue. Deodatus followed his father down the crooked cobblestone streets of Milan. Choking on the smell of rot and feces, he covered his mouth to cough as he carefully sidestepped a messy heap of rags. The pile moved, revealing a gnarled beggar. Around them, the hoarse calls of scratch-throated women and chaotic yells of stray children bounced from one dilapidated stone dwelling to the next. A screech sounded above them, and a rat fell from a tattered cloth overhang onto Deodatus's head. "Ah!" he cried, slapping at his hair. The rodent hit the ground next to him and zigzagged off into a darkened building crevice. Now 5 steps ahead of his son, Augustine angled back. "You okay?" Deodatus trotted to catch up, wincing at yet another foul stench. "You sure we need to come here?" He looked around to find the dark eyes of a little girl staring at him through an opened window. She didn't move and appeared half dead. "Yes," Augustine resumed his pace down the alleyway. "We must first bear through Esmeralda's smoke and mirrors, so she will eventually take us to Samo." "Esmeralda? And who's Samo?" "Samo's a Judaic scribe, or at least he used to be." He stopped at a closed door and knocked. "Don't worry. Follow my lead." The two stood waiting, but they heard no response beyond distant chatter echoing down the alley and the mysterious scampering of yet another rodent. Augustine pounded the door again. A muffled female voice spoke from the other side. Yes, I'm coming." Moments later, the door scraped open. Deodatus held his breath, apprehensive of what would be revealed. The face of an old, wrinkled woman, head draped in a cloth, emerged through the cracked opening. "What?" she demanded. "Esmeralda," Augustine said with solid confidence. "We are here to see—" "Augustine!" The old woman broke into a smile, revealing 2 solitary, rotten teeth. She shoved the door open further. "How long has it been?" "Too long," Augustine said. "This is my son, Deodatus." The sagging skin on Esmeralda's face stretched even wider. My, I remember when you were just a small child." Deodatus swallowed hard and tried to smile back. She looked to Augustine. "I remember when you were a child, too." Augustine faked the same smile as his son's. "Yes. Is Samo available?" She waved a wrinkled hand in the air. You speak too quick. Come inside." Once in the cramped dwelling, Deodatus blinked to adjust his eyes to the dimness. A fire crackling in the corner provided the only light. Rope crisscrossed the room in a dizzying array of lines, supporting fragments of cloth. Deodatus couldn't decide if the cloth was laundry drying or a strange decor. Hanging strings of beads covered the walls. As Esmeralda walked through a bead barrier into the next room, the glossy orbs danced. "Is Samo still here?" Augustine asked, as he and Deodatus swept the clinking strands aside to follow her into the next room. "All in due time," Esmeralda replied. "Now sit. Rows of sputtering candles offered little in the way of light. The old woman lowered herself into the center of a ring of rolled blankets patterned in red and gold. Sit, she repeated, shaking her bony arms. Augustine and Deodatus sat down together. "Samo," Augustine asked, "is he—" Esmeralda snatched Augustine's hand. "First, your palm." She caressed his firm hand with hers. Darkened tracks of veins traversed her crooked fingers, her knuckles swollen and distorted. She flipped Augustine's hand so his palm faced up and traced a wavy line. I see, Augustine. You're in a lot of trouble. You wouldn't be visiting your favorite Esmeralda if you weren't, eh?" She cackled, her laughter slipping into a phlegmy cough. Augustine and Deodatus exchanged a look. "Let's see now," the old woman continued, examining Augustine's palm. "You wish to leave all this behind, but you can't. You're trapped, I see. You think Samo will set you free, do you?" "If you don't mind," Augustine said. "We'd love to speak with him for a few minutes." Patience, young Augustine. She tugged at his hand. Always the impatient one. He slipped his hand away. We haven't time for this. She huffed. I must read the boy first. She snatched Diodotus's hand as sharply as she had his father's. Diodotus tried to pull away, but the old woman had a grip of iron. She flipped his hand upright. Ah, such young flesh. She licked her lips. So tender and salacious. She cackled again. Diodotus stiffened. She traced lines down and up his palm. The boy shivered. Then she stopped. Her smile snapped into a firm glare. You are not without sin, my boy. Diodotus yanked his hand away and shot to his feet. What is all this? Witchcraft? Augustine grabbed the boy's robe and pulled him back down. Diodotus, it's okay. She doesn't mean anything by it. Esmeralda threshed a disciplinary finger in the air. Never underestimate the fortunes. The voice of an old man spoke from a distance. Esmeralda, who's there? Some old friends, she answered the darkness. The man grunted as if struggling. Stay there, Esmeralda commanded, rolling her eyes. I'll help you. She stood and disappeared behind another wall of beads. Diodotus leaned into his father and in a rapid-fire whisper asked, What are we doing here? Can we leave? Please, son, have patience. Samo is why we're here. What does he possess that's so valuable? Experience. Wisdom. Namely regarding a detail that Olmo shared. Diodotus balked. The demon? You mean he's some sort of demon expert? Augustine nodded. But he... Diodotus's gaze darted around the small room as he tried to think of a response. You can't be serious. Very serious, said Augustine. Samo is just the man who would have some insight. Olmo didn't mean... You don't believe... Yes, I do. Don't you believe the boy? Diodotus looked down at his hands. I mean, of course I do. We trust each other, but... So it's worth investigating, Augustine cut in. Diodotus tightened his lips, struggling how to respond. Before he could, the beads parted, and an old man shuffled forward with Esmeralda guiding him from behind. Careful, careful, Esmeralda coaxed, as a hunched Samo hobbled forward on unsteady legs. His skin was aged and patchy, his long white beard frayed and matted, and his eyebrows so bushy they hid his eyes. Esmeralda led him to a set of pillows in front of Augustine and Diodotus. Samo's bones rattled as she lowered him to the floor. He gazed up at them, his dark eyes at last visible beneath his shaggy brows. He focused on Diodotus. Ah, his voice crackled. Augustine. That's my son, Augustine spoke up. Ah, Samo repeated with a nod. Diodotus. You remembered, Augustine said. I may wet myself from time to time, but the brain keeps working. Samo let out a high-pitched snigger. Diodotus couldn't help but smile. Now, why have you come? You wish to tap into old Samo's memory, huh? Another Christian text, perhaps? Sort of, Augustine replied. We wanted to ask you what you know about demons. Samo's eyebrows rose. Demons? Yes, Augustine coughed. There's a chance that someone Diodotus knows, a young boy, may have witnessed one. Samo didn't recoil, nor did he exhibit any sign of disbelief. Instead, he leaned back and breathed a heavy sigh. Esmeralda hovered behind the old man, taking the news with solemn quiet. And what are the circumstances? Inquired Samo. Augustine swallowed. The details are still in question, but there's a good chance he may have been caught in an act of sin. A boy? Samo asked. What degree of sin could a boy commit? He was with a man, Diodotus clarified. A man of the church. Augustine straightened at his son's response. Diodotus continued. The boy said he was violated. Samo's eyebrows angled. I see. The emergence targeted the man while the boy was of witness? Augustine coughed. That was my theory. Samo rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Was the man taken? Initially, Augustine said, but then he returned. Samo's head jerked up. Returned? He shrieked. Are you certain he was taken? Fairly confident, said Augustine. He claims he was grabbed by robbers, but his story sounded thin. Also, when he returned, he was naked and covered in a green slime. Augustine and Deodatus flinched. Samo displayed his blackened, crooked teeth. I've struck a chord. Yes, said Augustine. So, you understand. Samo exhaled heavily, his nostrils compressed and flared. I've read of a similar act that occurred long, long ago. What happened? Deodatus asked. From the ancient scrolls of Enoch, son of Jared and father of Methuselah. Samo pulled at his long beard and leaned in, as if preparing to share a deep secret with the pair. Enoch once learned of a great man, a king of a distant land, who led his people to a victory over a tribe that had oppressed them for generations. During the Rumpus Bacchanalia that followed, enslaved women from the conquered tribe were given to the king as a prize. He ravished these women throughout the night, torturing them to satisfy his perversions and vile pleasures, and to placate his sense of revenge on the tribe. By the following morning, the king was nowhere to be found. The leading generals searched the area and interrogated people of the conquered tribe, but couldn't find a trace of the king. That is, until the next day. His people found the king at the center of their village, balled up on the ground, naked and covered in an unearthly green gelatinous substance. After the king regained his senses, he claimed he'd been taken by a green-skinned demon. Demons, Augustine ventured. I've read what the scriptures say about Christ casting out demons, but so little is understood about the nature of the spiritual realm. I understand Enoch studied this area. What are these green-skinned creatures? Even Enoch didn't know much, replied Samo. He believed they are lesser deities who play a role in transporting souls to and from spiritual realms. But it wasn't the creatures themselves that fascinated Enoch. Rather, it was what this king did with the demon. Deodatus set forward. What did he do? Once recovered from his demonic encounter, the king bragged to his men that he'd cheated death by deceiving the demon, allowing his return. He deceived the demon? Deodatus wondered. How? Samo raised a finger. That is the very question Enoch wrestled with. He spent much of his years searching, praying, trying to discover how this king cheated a demon out of death. Some say it was this pursuit that led Enoch to ascend straight to heaven without suffering the noose of death himself. So, Augustine started slowly. Could it be that Brother Fides, the man of the church we mentioned, could it be that he too deceived the demon that took him? Samo's left eyebrow rose. Beyond trusting the words of this Brother Fides, there's only one way to find out. How? Deodatus asked. Esmeralda shifted in the corner of the room. Samo smiled wide, his narrow teeth glistening in the dim light. We ask the demon,